Hello, horror lovers. Welcome to House of Horrors. Today, we've reached the epic finale of The Child Who Heard the Dark. Daniel and his friends are entering the final battle against darkness. With Malvor's return, everything will change. Who will win? Turn off the lights, buckle up. Let's begin. The shadows of the war still echoed in my mind. We were all exhausted after the last battle, but we knew that Malvor's disciples were not completely destroyed. They would return, and this time they would be stronger. Elias was praying in the main hall of the church in the early hours of the morning. Sister Clara was lighting candles and reciting prayers from the sacred texts. I knelt down, trying to join in their rituals. This was no longer just a war. I needed to fill the void inside me. I had to strengthen my faith. My morning routines had changed. Every day, as soon as I woke up, I would pray. I walked through the small courtyard of the church and participated in purification rituals with holy water. Elias was teaching me special prayers. "Your soul is pure, Daniel," he would say. "But being pure is not enough. You must also be strong." Olivia and Nick, on the other hand, were on a different path. They were undergoing physical training. The priests of Lux Ordinis were teaching them how to wield a sword and how to protect themselves with sacred symbols. We were all preparing for a battle. And then that night came. A strange silence fell over the church. The candles suddenly went out. Even the wind stopped. I felt an indescribable unease inside me. Elias and Clara exchanged glances. Nick reached for his sword. Olivia held her breath. And then the doors opened. Malvor's disciples had returned. This time they weren't just shadows. Under their robes they wore metal armor. In their hands they wielded weapons infused with old, dark magic. And at the front, their leader, Malvor's right hand, "You underestimated us." The voice was so deep, so resonant, that it seemed to echo from the stone walls of the building itself. The figure stepping forward carried a long sword. He wore no mask. His face was completely hidden within a black mist. But his voice was not human. Elias raised his cross. "You do not belong to this land. If you do not leave, you will be destroyed." The man laughed. A long, eerie laugh. "Destroyed? You are truly naive, Elias. We did not come here to be destroyed. We came to take what is rightfully ours." His eyes turned to me, "And the key is here. No matter how much you try to run, Daniel, we will not leave without you." A chill ran through me, but this time I did not feel fear. I finally understood what I was. The key, the one who could open the gate or seal it. Nick and Olivia took their places beside me. "If you want him," Nick said, raising his sword, "you'll have to fight for it." Olivia tightened her grip on her cross. "And as long as we are here, you will not take Daniel." The battle began. Malvor's disciples lunged at us. The priests of Lux Ordinis raised their shields and took defensive positions. Elias hurled holy water and began chanting prayers. The shadows trembled, but this time they were more resilient. I tried to summon the energy within me. I looked at my hands. The seal was forming, but something was missing. The reinforced prayers. I had to remember them. Malvor's right hand charged directly at Elias. Elias raised his staff to block him, but the dark magic shattered the staff into pieces. "Is this all the strength you have, Elias?" the man taunted. "If your leader is this weak, I wonder why you even bother continuing this war." Nick and Olivia fought together. Olivia attacked with sacred symbols, while Nick had mastered physical combat. But the disciples kept coming, relentless. And then, within the shadows, Malvorus appeared. Until now, I had only heard his whispers. But for the first time, he stood fully before my eyes. He was massive, his form blurred. His entire being was made of darkness, yet he had a shape. He looked at me, directly into my eyes. "Daniel, this battle is pointless. You belong here. You must accept it." I took a deep breath. "I will never be on your side." Malvorus leaned closer. "My side, O child? You have yet to see the truth. I am merely a messenger. The real power has yet to awaken." Before I could comprehend his words, Malvorus raised his hand. The entire church plunged into darkness. Everything went silent. No sound remained. The light was gone. We had been completely pulled into his realm. Elias' voice rang out, "Daniel, use the seal now." But I couldn't move. Malvorus' power had completely bound me. "You cannot seal me, Daniel, because half of your power belongs to me." His words echoed in my mind. Was this possible? If half of my power belonged to him, could I really defeat him? At that moment, Olivia's voice pierced through the void. "Don't listen to him, Daniel. He's just trying to break you." Nick shouted, "Come on, do it." I closed my eyes. I focused on the light within me. I silenced his whispers. I remembered the prayers, and suddenly the seal fully activated. A pure white light burst from my hands. Malvorus screamed. A massive surge of energy exploded within the church. The shadows shattered. Malvorus' disciples recoiled. Elias raised his voice in prayer, and the Lux Ordinis priests joined him. Together, we pushed the darkness back. Before vanishing, Malvorus spoke one final sentence. "This is only the beginning. The real war starts now." And then he was gone. When it was all over, we collapsed to the ground. Elias was gasping for breath. Nick and Olivia could barely stand. Sister Clara had closed her eyes in prayer. But I felt something different inside me. This war wasn't over, but for the first time I believed we could win. After the last battle, we were all half alive, half dead. But we knew this was just the beginning. Malvorus' final words still echoed in my ears. The real war begins now. We now knew that Malvorus was not alone. He was merely a messenger of a far greater power, and his master was awakening. But who was this master? And the most terrifying question, how were we supposed to stop him? That morning, an unsettling tension filled the stone walls of the church. Elias and the priests of Lux Ordinis had locked themselves in the library, poring over ancient texts. Sister Clara had intensified her prayers, as if she knew something terrible was coming. As for me, I was meditating in the courtyard like I did every morning, but this time a voice echoed in my mind. "Daniel." I opened my eyes immediately. The wind stopped. Even the sunlight dimmed for a moment. A deep, unexplainable chill ran through me. That was when I understood. The entity was awakening. That night, I had a terrifying dream. I was alone inside the church. Shadows surrounded me. Screaming priests, blood seeping from the walls, candlelight distorting into grotesque shapes. And right before me stood Malvorus. But he was different now, larger, stronger. The void in his eyes was even deeper. He stepped closer and leaned in. "Your time is up, Daniel," he whispered. "My master is coming. And you are the gateway." A freezing terror filled me. Just as I tried to escape, A long, clawed hand touched my shoulder from behind. I turned around, and what I saw was not human. A faceless entity, its empty eye sockets whispering like a chorus of lost souls. Black smoke seeped from its fingers as it spoke in a slow, eerie voice. "If you resist him, we will crush you." Then I woke up, drenched in sweat, my heartbeat racing. But the worst part? Someone was standing in the corner of my room, a silhouette, vaguely human, but infinitely more terrifying. White, glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. It whispered, "The Master is waking, Daniel," and then it melted into the shadows. At dawn, I told Elias everything. His face turned grim, more serious than I had ever seen before. "This is worse than we thought," he said. "We have to stop Malvor's master before he fully awakens." Nick gripped his sword. "And how exactly do we do that?" Elias opened an ancient book. "There is only one way to completely seal the passage. We must learn his true name. Only then can we bind him." Olivia frowned. "And how do we find that name?" Sister Clara narrowed her eyes. "Do you remember the missing last page of Liber Tenebris? If that name exists anywhere, it will be either in the sacred scriptures or the oldest graveyards." Elias nodded. "And the oldest graveyard we know of is the abandoned shadow graves." A deep fear settled in my chest, because the shadow graves were not just a resting place for the dead. They were a prison for forgotten entities. That night we set out for the abandoned cemetery. When we arrived, even the moonlight failed to illuminate the tombstones. The air was deathly silent. Elias raised his hands and traced a sacred seal. "There are no living beings here," he murmured, "but we are being watched." Just then a shadow emerged from between the gravestones. Malvor's right hand. He smirked. "Still not giving up?" Nick unsheathed his sword. "You can't stop us." The man laughed. "I don't need to stop you, because you've already lost." At that moment the ground began to tremble. The earth cracked open. Tombstones shattered, and something began to rise. A colossal entity, dormant for centuries. A creature with no eyes, skeletal limbs, and black smoke rising from its form. The moment I heard its voice, all the whispers I had ever heard suddenly made sense. "You have called me. Now you cannot escape." Olivia screamed. Elias began reciting prayers, but I just stood there, because this thing was calling to me. Darkness consumed my vision. I felt myself being pulled from my body, falling into an endless void. And there, in that abyss, I saw him, Malvor's master. He smiled at me. "Hello, Daniel." At that moment, the creature's arms reached for me. The instant its cold, skeletal fingers touched my body, something inside me changed. It felt like my soul was being drained. The voice in my mind was no longer a whisper, it was a deafening command. Behind me, Elias and the Lux Ordinis priests continued their prayers. Nick and Olivia desperately tried to reach me, but I was no longer in their world. The entity stepped forward. "You want to seal me away, don't you?" it whispered. "But there's something you don't understand. I am not even here." My eyes widened, and in that moment I realized the truth. This was just a reflection. The real one was much closer. And this could be the end of everything. The moment when everything would come to an end had arrived. The entity rising before us in the shadow graves was not the Lord of Malvorus. It was only a reflection, while the true one still concealed itself. Yet even that was powerful enough. The voice whispering in my mind was no longer just an echo. It was like an order. Elias and the priests of Lux Ordinis immediately began reciting prayers. Nick and Olivia took their places by my side. We all knew that there was no turning back from this battle. Daniel? The entity extended its gigantic, bony hands toward me. The moment I felt its touch, I realized that my soul was shaken. Something inside me was changing something, trying to draw me in. Elias shouted, "Daniel, do not surrender to it. You are our last hope." But the Lord of Malvers continued speaking. "You are not one of them, Daniel. You have become a bridge, the final barrier between humans and us. And this barrier is about to crumble." Nick raised his sword. "Do you think it will join you? It hates you." The entity turned toward Nick, letting out a cold laugh. With one swift motion, it lifted Nick into the air. Olivia screamed, "Nick, no!" But it was too late. The entity squeezed Nick and suddenly flung him into the air. When Nick collided with one of the tombstones, something inside me broke. Nick was now dead. My eyes filled with tears, yet I couldn't cry. I couldn't control my rage. Now I had only one purpose, to seal this entity forever. Elias continued his prayers. The priests of Lux Ordinis were attempting to confine the Lord of Malvers, but the creature was growing even stronger. "None of you can stop this." Sister Clara raised her hands to the sky and shouted, "Daniel, use the seal. This is your destiny." I looked at my hands. The seal was beginning to reform. The entity approached me. "You cannot do this." But I could. I would do it, ... I took a deep breath and gathered all my strength. The priests of Lux Ordinis joined me in prayer as a white light enveloped everything. The entity let out a scream. It began to convulse, but at the last moment, Elias was suddenly thrown back. One of Malvers's disciples had plunged his dagger into Elias's chest. "No," I shouted, ... Elias looked into my eyes and smiled. "Finish this." When he breathed his last, something inside me completely broke. I owed him everything. I spread my arms and unleashed all the power within me. When the seal was complete, the white light exploded like a blast. The Lord of Malvers vanished with a scream. The shadows dispersed. The dark smoke vanished. The earth settled back into place. But the cost had been heavy. Nick and Elias were no longer with us. Days later, Lux Ordinis brought me back to the church. I was no longer just a child. Sister Clara approached me. "We have a reward for you, Daniel." They handed me a white robe. I had become one of the sacred warriors of Lux Ordinis. Yet inside there was an emptiness for those I had lost, and for the future, because I knew that darkness would always return. But this time I would be ready for it. Dear friends, today, as we reach the end of our epic 4-part journey, we have together inscribed the traces of courage, sacrifice, and hope that we carried in our hearts. In the end of darkness and sacrifice, we witnessed how every loss, every pain, and every victory only served to strengthen the light within us. This adventure was not only a tale of confronting darkness, but also a journey of discovering just how powerful the hope and love hidden within us truly are. Our story ends here, yet every ending heralds a new beginning. Thanks to your support, faith, and bravery, this epic has transformed into an unforgettable legacy. With every step we took, we became stronger, more hopeful, and more resolute together. Though our journey is over, the light in our hearts will always guide us. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining us on this adventure and for sharing in our sorrows and joys. Remember, no matter how deep the darkness may be, the light within us will never fade. Farewell, and until we meet again in new beginnings.